And let me also start sharing if I can remember how to do that. It's been a while. Do you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, good. So we have a Google Doc collecting information for what is just a 3 sprint finish to Satisfying Cactus. Before we get to that, let's take stock of where we are with the 4.1 release. Maybe I'll let Andy give us a status report.
Sure. So as of this morning, all of the critical bugs that we identified in the bug sprint yesterday have been resolved. And so I think we are ready to cut a release candidate this afternoon. I believe QA is still working on some of the tests that they'll use to validate the 4.1 release and give that their thumbs up. So it sounds like maybe that will take another day or two for them to be ready to do the comprehensive testing of the release candidate. But my expectation is we'll cut it this afternoon.
That's good. Anyone else have any other comments on that? Okay, so just to make sure everyone's on the same page, we will have
Do you have summaries of what is delivered in 4.1?
That's what I was just going to do.
Okay, we're starting. Okay.
So what 4.1 will include is basically the 4.0 plus an eCord profile and an mCord profile. Those are the two value add beyond 4.0. On the eCord profile, we don't have any. Well, I guess maybe Scott could speak to it since you were part of the team that worked on it. But basically, we have a virtual network as a service interconnecting a set of eCord configured pods. Each pod has a virtual enterprise Ethernet connecting into that backbone. Scott, any other summary of what's in there? Or anyone else
so
from
we
eCord?
do have. Can you hear me, Larry?
Yep.
Okay, we do have a VEG. That would be the slow path. It is there, but we need to do the network plumbing to get packets to that slow path. So I think that's one of the key tasks that needs to be done for eCord for 5.0.
That's for 5.0. I'm just focusing on 4.1, what is technically included in the release. By the way, those that have not gone there, let me.
Larry, should we start recording?
I thought I did.
We did.
Let me make sure it's actually recording.
Says this session is being recorded, so I'm assuming it's working.
Yeah, there it is. It is. Thank you, David. So if you go to the service profiles, this is basically the new stuff. It's all under eCord. So this is, I would say, this would be the best summary of the new capabilities with respect to eCord. So VEG is listed here. Is it, Scott? But it's not officially part of the release, right?
Well, so the status, I mean, there's nuance to this, but the status is that it's part of the release, but we have not sent any end-to-end traffic through it. So it's there. It's unit tested. And according to Box, it has WAN connectivity, but we don't have the slow path, so we don't have a way to automatically send traffic to it.
Okay, so we probably ought to. It's fine to include it as there. We ought to annotate the documentation accordingly.
So here's something that I had Andrea put together. Oh. provide a link. It's just a summary of what is part of eCord 4.1.
So there shouldn't be any surprises in here that are not included in that documentation. All right, so the documentation does include an overview. It includes a CFM setup guide. It does include some troubleshooting, so from documentation point of view, it's there. Yeah, I believe all of this is here.
So I think the point is there's automation of end-to-end E-line. There's OEM and CFM for it, so it'll provide delay and jitter, and the slow path is not automated. And so I think with 5.0, it's automating the slow path.
Right.
And internet connectivity.
Okay, that's a good way.
Then
That's a good way of putting it.
the automation of CFM and OEM for E-line. I think the requirement on the platform team and Jono is to help out to automate the slow path.
Okay, so I don't think anyone has touched the release notes, so we should do a 4.1 release note that includes that. I mean, to a first approximation, it's summarizing the profile, but just to make it complete, we should add that to the release notes.
Yeah, I think the high level description helps, right? The problem with the profile is sometimes you kind of get lost in the details.
Yeah. So let's do that, and we've got the raw material for eCord. Turning our attention to mCord, I don't have a link in front of me to the Google Doc with all of this information in it, which Luca was in the process of moving into the guide. Does anyone know the status of shifting to 4.1 mCord? Does anyone know the status of that?
I will share with you right now. Just give me a moment. I'll share with you the link.
I also put it, send it you through the message.
Yeah. So yeah, there you go.
Is that the same? Okay.
I would imagine it's the same. Yeah.
Okay.
Either one would.
All right. Good. So we have the mCord NG40 profile. And so this documentation, I looked at it a few days ago. So it's basically the mCord equivalent to, I'm not going to go through it in detail, to what we have for eCord. Does anyone know where we are with respect to moving that into the guide? I think maybe Luca took that on, but maybe he's got too many things on his plate.
From the document view, it's all done, and Luca waiting because yesterday we gave we let Jenkins to run the test. Luca just want to get everything is success in Jenkins, then he started to push. So I think maybe he started to push today, I guess.
Okay, so if I wouldn't hold the release candidate for this because we can always come in and add this, but before the official release, we need to get this into the guide. I think the other thing is, and I'll put this to Oz and Ping Ping, and well, anyone that's swarmed on mCord, it would be good to get a high level, let's call it an executive summary of this material, comparable to what we just saw a minute ago from eCord, and add it into the release notes.
So the what is mCord section is actually a pretty good high level summary.
This mCord section?
Yeah, the what is mCord.
Exactly. I would just maybe copy and paste that.
Okay, that's that's good. You're right, that is good. So why wasn't the eCord one like that? I mean, maybe what's there was.
Yeah, we probably want to make sure it has that content.
Here is the what is eCord. it might have been a little bit more generic as opposed to specific. Yeah, that kind of looks more generic. Okay. In any case, let's get the executive summary of both of these into the release notes. Well, so just a second. Back to then the MCORD summary. I guess this is the key paragraph. So we've got the SP gateway in the form of two VNFs, the control and user plane, and then we have everything else emulated in that integrates the emulated eNode B, the UEs, and so on. And that emulator is not open source, but comes courtesy of NG4T. So that's, I think, the succinct summary of where we are with the 4.1 version of MCORD. Anything?
Right. Maybe the only thing that I would add to it is now we have also the capability to call on EPC as a service,
that's
which
right. Thank you.
I think that's quite significant because we now have a service calling on, the correct order of onboarding and of different services and stitching them together.
Okay, thank you.
I think we should also clarify that internet connectivity is being supported by an application server, right, as part of the emulated platform.
All right, so let's include the EPC, I don't know, what do you call it, the master service or the...
I tend to call it a EPC slice as a service, or you could just simply call it EPC as a service too.
That's. I think that there's documentation to that effect. So let's just call it. It includes EPC as a service. So I'm just going to for release notes purposes. So it also includes EPC as a service, and we need to mention what was it? The emulated upstream.
Application server is essentially emulating connectivity to the internet. So yes, we're emulating the internet connectivity.
Okay. All right. So we now have drafts of what goes into the release notes for 4.1. So the to-dos on the documentation are to get which Luca, until he relinquishes it to someone else, move the Google Doc into the guide, and then we need a release note containing these two summaries.
Okay. I can add those two sentences to this paragraph, and should I email it to you, Larry, or?
Yeah, I will go ahead and add the two bits of material I'll take care of the release notes. So yeah. Well, I mean, okay. if you add the sentences here, then I know where to grab it from.
I will add the sentences right after this meeting.
Okay.
I think what's nice to include as part of the release notes is just some of the constraints around the NG4T emulator, because that clarifies the extent of what can actually be done.
Where is that documented? Is in here?
Further down.
Oh, here it is. I got the NG40 vTester software, but you need a license, right? So I think this is probably the key thing also for release notes.
I think, right, noting that it emulates like one eNode B, 10 UEs.
Yeah, that was kind of in the other paragraph. Let me augment what I said a minute ago. Oz, could you, when you make the changes to this document, could you email me the pieces that you then think are an adequate representation of what goes in the release notes?
Okay, will do.
And I think we've got it summarized here with my two comments, but I might have missed a little something. All right. Anything else on where we are with 4.1? So we're hoping to release Canada later today. We should have the documentation squared away later today, including release notes with all appropriate caveats. Anything else on 4.1?
So are we officially calling feature freeze on 4.1 then for anything that was not on the list of critical bugs?
Yes.
So all new work goes into master.
Yeah, that would be my read on it. Anyone else?
Yes, please don't put anything else into 4.1.
Not counting the documentation that we've just talked about.
Yeah, that's right. We're only fixing critical bugs right now.
Okay. Let's move on now to back to the next 3 sprints worth of work. So if you're following along, I'm back to the release planning Google Doc, if you wanted to jump in yourself. So officially, sprint 4 of this release cycle starts next Monday. We've got roughly 3 week sprints. The whole objective, the high level objective for Satisfying Cactus when we started was to get more of all of the work that's been done in parallel into the official release, and that's meaningful because then it gives someone the whole community a maintained and supported and integrated set of services and profiles to work with, and hopefully then feedback onto. So we made good progress on that, but there is continued work basically along all the same threads that we've been working on. So I kind of, in some respects, it's a continuation. We've got a checkpoint of this, and there's just more to do. The high level objectives are a reduction of a discussion about what trials and demos and external promises that have been made, with a lot of input from the use case steering team. But at the top of the list is that we do have 2 Cord field trials. And to a first approximation, they involve the task of integrating Volta into Cord, and so bringing Volta onto the platform, into the release, in the same way we just did with the E&M Cord profiles. That's objective number 1. That is not strictly speaking due by February 15th, but we do have some intermediate things that we want to get done that would be then included in 5.0, which we'll come to in a minute. But that's, I think, the thing that's driving a lot of the work. The second item, this is just to make all get level set here. The second item is that multi-access edge is becoming a high-profile objective for Cord, with Cord as an example prototype implementation. We're at the cusp of being able to demonstrate that, but we haven't actually taken the step of configuring a profile that is a hybrid of RE and M in some combination. There's expectation that we could do one of those, but we need to actually take that step. And we also believe that there will undoubtedly be some snafus that crop up that will need attention. But just to emphasize the point, this is taking existing work and combining it. This is not introducing any new access-specific features. So this does not hinge upon, for example, Volta. It doesn't hinge on XRAN. Those would be demonstrations that came down the road somewhere. For now, take stuff that we can do today in RE and M profiles and combine them. The third high-level objective is basically to continue what we've already started with E&M Cord. We didn't get everything that MCORD has in its repertoire included, so there's some pretty obvious next steps there. eCord we made pretty good complete progress on, but as you heard a minute ago, there's still a few loose ends that need attention. This is, again, for the sake of having a common reference implementation that people can build on, and getting out of the scenario we found ourselves in where we had all these parallel versions, and every time somebody added a new feature, it was added into the parallel version and not into the release. So this is about taking what's already been done and bringing it into that's sitting there ready to go. It just needs to be fully integrated and bringing it into the release. That doesn't preclude other wonderful new features being added to any one of these profiles. But that's not really adequately captured in the notes below because those aren't priorities. Some of that will happen, but it's, like I said, probably not a priority. So that translates then into the following high-level work items. And maybe these, one time we would map these into epics, but I won't presume that mapping here, but we'll just call out, again, for the various profiles that we continue this process with a particular emphasis on integrating Arcord and Voltha, that we come up with some sort of hybrid or two, and we just need to decide what are the best candidates to put in that list. We continue the work with E and M Cord. A-Cord, we have, again, I would say migration to the 4.0 platform or APIs, but that's then will become some element of this will be then included in 5.0. So that's one large work item that probably translates into multiple epics, one per integration effort, I would just guess. And I'm going to go through this and we'll come back. I just wanted to give everyone a high-level overview. The next big item, partly in support of the Voltha work, but partly for a variety of other reasons, is to integrate Kubernetes. And that's a two-part thing, and I've just lumped it together here, but that's basically, we want to deploy a containerized version of all of our management services using Kubernetes. So this is Kubernetes in support of what runs on the head node. And then the stretch goal, again, we don't have to get this by February 15th, but the other thing on the horizon is deploying VNFs using Kubernetes. And once we can do that,
Kubernetes, when you say Kubernetes on the head node, Kubernetes by definition is a cluster of nodes working together. So Kubernetes on the head nodes, we're going to have a Kubernetes cluster of one, or are we actually going to say everything in the pod is part of that Kubernetes cluster, and therefore components that typically run on a quote-unquote head node might be running on other nodes as well?
Yeah, good question. Let me add that as an issue here. Let me
pod deployment topology.
Eliminate the head compute node split or economy or whatever.
Right.
Yeah. So there are some design. So this is, yeah, that's a great point, and there are actually other points down below that kind of depended on that. And I'll just to make note of it, normalizing the calls on VNFs so that you can call from a head node to a non-head node in the old way. Right now, you can make direct REST calls if you're on the head node, but not across the pod. So that's kind of related. Okay, so again, this high-level overview, just to get everyone level set. We continue in the platform side to have some improvements both to developer support and in the zero touch, approaching zero for zero touch and the build system. And there's some low-level things that didn't fit nicely anywhere else that just are loose ends that need to be cleaned up, time permitting. So, oops, I'm sorry, QA fell, I didn't see that down on the bottom. So there's also QA, which I hadn't seen yet, so I don't know exactly what's there, but probably looks good.
I can quickly go over. So, Larry, can I go over quickly, summarize them?
Yeah, let's do a summary here, yeah.
Okay, so mostly QA will be focusing on streamlining the various Jenkins jobs that we have. We have created many test jobs in 4.1, so there are more optimizations that needs to be done in the Jenkins job. So much of the work will be there, and also some post-install configurations to automate them in the pods. So for MCOD and ECOD, we still need to do that. Our code is completely done. And also working on some MCOD and ECOD plan is to create some functional tests and integrate the existing tests to the Jenkins. So, and then I think picking up the functional and module depends on the after we talk to the development and then prioritize the task accordingly for ECOD and MCOD. So that's at the high level.
Great, thank you. So this is a nice release worth of work. We have half a release to get all of this done, so we're not going to.
That was my next question. Realistically, how much of this are we looking at in the next 3 sprints?
So with having all of that loaded into everybody's head, let's go back to the top. And I don't know if this is going to work, but let's give this a try. Let's try to distinguish between must from would like to. And again, this is with respect to the February 15th target. So assuming some amount of feature freeze, we've got 6-7 weeks worth of work. Let's just start at the beginning here with our Cord Volta. What is absolute must? And what I'm going to do is just go through this and, I don't know, highlight it, change color on the bullets as we go through, just to signify must. Maybe 3 colors here. High priority, would really like to, and probably not. Saurav?
Well, the first 6 bullet points are a must. I have a different nice to have list, which is not reflected here. I only put in the must list. The other 2, I think you put them in, or maybe John.
No, I actually put both of those.
So a couple questions here. Upgrading ONOS to 1.12 has implications on Volta, meaning upgrading their apps as well.
Yeah.
So there's our Cord work here and Volta work here that need to be taken account for. Also, when you say integrate into Cord build process, what does that mean? Because in my mind, Volta is essentially an independent project on which Cord depends or will utilize under certain conditions. It's not. I can build Cord without Volta. I can build Volta without Cord. I don't think we want to make a bi-directional umbilical cord between them.
No, I didn't. Yeah, I didn't mean that. I meant that we can build a configuration of Cord that includes Volta.
And when I guess when I say include, I wouldn't have that build Volta. I would have that build depend on Volta, pull the Volta containers, whatever you say, but it's a binary dependency, not a source code dependency.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Cord 5.0 will depend on a particular version of Volta.
Yeah.
That would containers. It won't be building anything.
Okay, good. I just want to make sure I wasn't completely out of line with my thought.
No, you're not.
The issue is we still have the ONOS dependency, right?
Yeah, I mean, if we upgrade to ONOS 1.12, there are some apps that are shared between our Volta and Cord.
Okay, so time out, right? So when we say upgrade ONOS to 1.12, we're mainly talking about the infrastructure ONOS, right? We haven't made a determinant. We haven't determined whether the Volta dependency on ONOS is going to be on which of those ONOSs that we actually use right now. Is it the Fabric ONOS? Is it the VTN access-based ONOS? Typically, we used to do it on the access-based ONOS, right?
Or will there be a third ONOS instance in this
Will
deployment?
there be a third? So those determinations haven't been made yet, but we will get to that over the next.
So Saurabh, would it make sense to
Just as a note, when you talk about multiple instances of ONOS, even the 2 Cord has today, when you get into an HA environment, you're talking potentially 3 instances of each one we have today. So right now we have 2 instances of ONOS in Cord, which means in HA we have 6. And if we add a third instance of ONOS, we're talking 9 instances of ONOS for a Cord deployment.
I think we have to resolve the first issue of the head node and the compute node being separate. So if we start getting rid of that, then we can start talking about multiple instances of ONOS that we put separate clusters. So we're very far away from the HA case, just to be right. So I think we always use just one head node. Putting 3 instances of ONOS in one head node makes no sense. So I see that line over here that says, okay, we're going to try and get rid of the differences between a head and a compute node. Once we do that, we start talking HA, I think.
Okay.
So, Saurabh, is it fair to say that that first upgrade ONOS bullet is we probably better categorized under Trellis instead of our Cord Volta? I mean, it's a NIT, but everything else is specific to Volta, it looks like.
Yeah, that's fair.
All right.
I didn't see a Trellis bullet, so we
No,
put it there.
there wasn't. That I'll just throw it in here for real quickly. Hopefully in a semi-consistent way. Okay. So, all right. So those are all high priority and hopefully done in for the next release. The configure one is one that I added because this is ongoing work with AT&T to try to define a generic interface to an access peripheral, a residential access peripheral. And the code word for that is OSAM, OSAM, Open Source Access Manager. So there's work going on with Blaine and some folks at AT&T to try to define that, and it's using Volta as the thing that the target to be configured, to be managed, and also exploring the use of XOS as a way of implementing that for its tooling. I wouldn't call that absolute by then. This is one of those that progress will be continued to be made. Maybe there'll be a prototype. So I'm not quite with that understanding. I would consider it progress will be made. Some time will probably be put into it. Maybe mostly by the partner in this case. Probably not in the release. Moving to the hybrid, I'm basically just looking for a candidate as to what would make for a reasonable candidate. And can we? Well, let me just put the following: the 4.1 combine the 4.1 version of REM Cord. We're looking for just a very first version of this. Does that seem reasonable? Should we shoot for something less than that?
I would probably go for something between that and the 5.0 version that we're listing. Specifically for the AM Cord, the 4.1 has an emulator, and in 5.0 we are getting rid of that dependency. So I would rather see the M Cord in the REM to be a version that is not dependent on NG40.
All right, so I'm going to say combine. I'm going to give ourselves a lower first bar. Combine the 4.1 version of E and M, or sorry, E and R.
Can I be a bit of a Grinch here?
Sure.
Why Why are you R chord, E chord, M chord, A chord? And I'm gonna make a generalization. Please don't take offense to any. None are completely solid, have full capabilities in terms of HA, scale, performance, even all the capabilities we necessarily want for them. When do we say we want to solidify what we have versus keep reaching out to this next thing, to the multi-edge core? Why are we chasing multi-edge core when single-edge core isn't kind of at production quality?
Because seeing that potential is important to the board, I guess is really what it comes down to, in all honesty. And let me, just from a Cord let me try to say it in TST terms. We're attempting to define a platform that can be reused. Being able to do a candidate 1, candidate 2 demonstration that it's possible to reuse, even though what we're reusing, even though the things being run on it aren't solid, is a step towards that goal.
I get that, but my point is, because what we have isn't solid, trying to make it combine things right now may be an effort that isn't, well, as the things solidify, we might find some other things that make any integration we do today not work, right? And I'm not sure we know all the questions for a single edge yet.
And I would
such that we can actually.
Good point, but I would use, David, I would use exactly the same argument for doing it, and that is that we very likely have some assumptions baked into the various flavors that don't easily generalize, and we should learn about that sooner rather than later. Different assumptions being made in the data plane.
Yeah, I guess I'm just worried we're stretching thin, right, before we get everything else done.
Yep.
Just an opinion.
Yep. I would like to know if I would like to have a list of what needs attention to inform making each of the candidates more solid. I mean, we learned a lot integrating MCord. Just, it was a set of people that had made a set of assumptions that were perfectly reasonable, and when you start to combine those with other people's assumptions, you learn about things.
So Saraf, you had mentioned that there were some gotchas, right? So are some of those dependencies kind of noted here that would need to be taken into account?
Well, I think I'm hopeful that we worked through those in the MCord, just using that as an example process. So I would just like an existence proof that to use the example, M and R Cord can run simultaneously on a common platform. If it does, then it didn't take a lot of effort. If it doesn't, then I'd like to know why. We're going to be investing in increasing energy in Kubernetes, and we're going to be starting to introduce new assumptions about how containers in the network connect together. I will leave these unbold for right now. I wanted to try to capture candidate 2, which was Oz's comment about include the 5.0 features of MCord. And that basically means do not emulate eNode B. Did I capture that, Oz?
And MME.
Yes.
Yeah, and MME. Okay, that makes sense. There was way too much emulation there.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've got a 2-step process here. So what are those MCord features, or 5.0 features of MCord? If you could walk through those.
Sure. I mean, for this MAE, we would need the second bullet and the third bullet. specifically. So those are musts. And then, so basically the remainder actually is all the SDN applications for SDN services for mCord.
Yep.
And of those three, we already have ported the XRAN app to ONOS 1.12. So that should be quite easy to include. So I would put that as a definite for 5.0. And then the SP Gateway ONOS application is something that we are just starting, and that is going to go in parallel with our P4 work. So I'm hopeful that we will get that as part of 5.0 as well. And I would leave probably the program as the last on the list, because we have yet to hear from Netsia to give us the code. So there may be some issues with them. So I don't want to necessarily put that as a must for 5.0.
Netsia, I thought Dimitri was working on this ONOS app.
I'm talking about the program on ONOS app.
Oh, program, okay.
Yeah. Right. So the SP Gateway, I'm hopeful that we will release it as part of 5.0. So that could be a bold as well.
And then I was what about if we're removing kind of the emulation, are we getting rid of the application server emulation and plumbing to the internet?
Correct. So we need to add that in too, Larry. That's a very good point, Yen. So we will have a B router integration and
one thing I must caution is some of these things that we're talking about here were planned for the MWC demo. Does that necessarily have to be the same as Cord 5.0? Because 5.0 has an ONOS dependency, so some of these things, if they're going to be written on a version of ONOS, I mean, if it's a separate version of ONOS that is not the same ONOS that is used in Trellis, maybe that's okay. But you see what I'm saying? If we're still developing these apps, Cord 5.0 officially depends on ONOS 1.12, which was released in December. So what ONOS version are we talking about for program, for this SP Gateway app, and so on?
Saurav, you have a very valid point, but architecturally, I am starting to lean more and more on advocating a third ONOS for the mCord SDN services, because of the simple fact that I would like to place it on a compute node and not on the head node.
Right. Okay. Got it. So it is. Yeah, okay.
But having said that, all of the apps are going to be running on ONOS 1.12.
Okay.
But 1.12 is going to be released. Right, so all of these in development are, well, I guess so, because 1.13 isn't until April.
Yes.
So
Also,
go ahead.
Yeah. Also, I want to ask for the list, the task list here, the story list here. Because I didn't attend the MWC planning, I believe you already have some discussions. How many work listed here can be used in MWC? Or the MWC is totally another list, task list?
No, basically the integration of the MME is going to be reused in MWC.
Okay.
Testing it with an actual eNodeB is going to be reused in MWC. vRouter is going to be reused in MWC. So everything is going to also be used in MWC. We're not talking about two different paths.
Okay, so except the list here, do we have other tags only for MWC but not for 5.0? I don't know. Can you?
So not necessarily, because the SP Gateway ONOS application is going to have two southbounds, one for P4 and one for OpenFlow, and because of that, basically the first 5 bullets will make up our MWC demo.
There are 2 additional tasks, though. We need to plumb in the BNF.
Correct.
Right, that we've offloaded.
Correct. So we need to also, think about the switch side. Yeah. Correct.
And then we need to integrate in a P4 fabric.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So I'm trying to capture that here. Well, so just to make note that MWC uses, the point I was made about it's not a parallel effort, but then it has to do some extra work. This work does not rise to the same level of completeness, or whatever you want to call it, as being released. So
exactly. So I'm thinking that would be probably geared towards a future release, because after MWC we would make it more release ready.
All right, I'm just making note here, to be included in a future release.
I mean, for the simple reason that that future release will need to officially include P4 capabilities.
Right. Yeah. So have I captured the MCord work here reasonably well with the bold meaning must? I guess I could say MWC is a must.
Yes, that's a must, but it is a must for a different purpose and not for a release purpose.
Right. That's fine. This is good.
And then same with the SP Gateway ONOS app. That is a must for the MWC as well.
Well, so can I move that down here then?
Yes.
The release planning document. Why are you putting all this must for this? Not the demo planning document.
So
I think Saurav has a valid point, so you probably want to unbold them, and then I think the bolded items are targeted for the 5.0 release.
I'm confused about what you just said. I didn't hear.
So I think I think the question I have is, are the bolded items intended to reflect what will be in the 5.0 release?
No. Bold was high priority. They're must.
Are they a must for the 5.0 release?
Well, they're a must for. All right, good. All right, so it's a must. So let me.
But they may not be integrated as part of the release.
That's right. Whoops.
So I think what we may want to do is, if someone were to look at this doc, if they were to see kind of the black bolded items, maybe that would give the indication of these are the things that they would expect in the 5.0 release.
Yeah. So it is. You're right. It is worth calling out. There's sort of 2 orthogonal things going on here. One is what's in the 5.0 release, what's a must for the 5.0 release, which is bold, and we now have high priority work items are going to need attention in exactly the same time period, but for a different result, which is the demo. And I'll make note of my color scheme as when we get done here. All right, so anyone on from eCord? I haven't been paying attention here. I'm guessing not just yet. So we'll come back to that. Cord. Laura? Or anyone able to speak?
Sorry, I was mute, so yeah, excuse me.
No problem.
Well, yeah. Obviously, the must-have is the migration, and the other 2 can wait.
So there has been, you and I have had discussion, I know it's been a broader discussion about abandoning the old implementation and starting afresh. What is your thinking on that?
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, to head that direction, we have to see some POCs, and we have to see it, in action and working. And we will have that work in parallel, regardless of, we're going to include it for 5.0 release or not. And depending on the progress we're going to see in that POC, I think we should move to a brand new implementation. If you would like to see that first before we put some effort on migration of the existing code, that will also make sense to me too. So because in order to achieve this migration, we will also need support from the platform people. And
all right, so we've got a choice here. The choice is between migration of old implementation to the 4.0 APIs and prototyping a new implementation.
Yeah.
And well, we don't have to make that decision right now, but I think, so what can you say about the plans for the new?
Well, we actually could give a try to, Sarkant is already working on Prometheus, I guess, as a candidate, new open source alternative. Also, another one could be DCAE, but which is quite a big thing. And I know that you had that comment to Serkant as well. So it seems like it's going to be Prometheus first that we're going to try.
So what if I think we're, through inactivity, gravitating towards option 2. What if we made a demonstration of the prototype, but it's perhaps short of official release, as a target for 5.0? The code's there, anyone can try it out. It's not quote unquote official. That's always been the case anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Does that sound?
Yeah. That's I think yeah, something logical, because as I said, the other alternative, the option 1, will also require a lot of effort from the platform team.
Yeah.
And so maybe it's going to be more efficient if we go with option 2.
With option 2, is the platform team, I assume we're still going to be involved in integrating this prototype into XOS as a service?
That's correct, but it will be a second phase. Once we see, once we identify the correct technology at the core of Cord, and then as a second step, we're going to need your help as well. That's for sure.
All right, so
But it may not be. Yeah.
Well, so I was just going to say, it sounds like that this is in the priority. Prototyping the new implementation is the bold thing that it would be really, really good to have a demonstration proof of concept prototype of a new version of Cord that we could then, by 5.0, that we could then put the muscle into, the resources into making sure it was part of the next release.
Okay, yeah, that sounds good to me. Like,
yeah, I'll get that. Hopefully it parses to demo at 5.0 what that means.
I guess that means that's not going to be integrated to XOS at that time.
Whatever a good demo is, we're leaving the exact definition. A compelling demo is vague, but I have a hard time believing we're going to get in 3 sprints, we're going to get a lot of completeness to that demonstration. It really is going to be a proof of concept.
Probably, yeah.
All right. Okay, Kubernetes. I don't know that we have Gopinath, but we do have David. Is there anything what's to say about that? What's the objective in the next few sprints?
I mean, there's several things that are being worked on. I think what you have here is kind of the first line. Let's get the things we have deployed via Kubernetes. I think that's a fine. Let's get that done.
Good.
And everything else at this point becomes a stretch goal.
Good. I like that. Everything else already said stretch. And this is
right. I mean, the head compute node is kind of a default implication there, but
yeah. Well, I was going to say it would be good to do some I don't know, complete some design notes. Write it.
Okay.
I mean, it would be good to have a little bit better handle on the implications, and so that when we do release planning next time, we have a little bit clearer picture of what all is involved, because that could turn out to have far-reaching implications to the management network.
Nope. That's fine. I think that's fine. We'll have to put kind of that design written out design plan there as well.
Yeah, design plan. Good. That's the word I was looking for. Well, I'll just bold that just to keep. That's okay.
Okay.
Or complete maybe is a strong word, but have a design plan.
Okay.
Okay. Improve developer support. I'm going to anticipate what Scott is about to say because he says it every time we talk through this. What else do we consider a must here?
I think complete the login diagnostic support. We should really complete it because we are really close to it, and it's a huge help for all the developers and operators.
Yep, I agree with that. Thank you.
But I guess based upon the objectives, so Larry, just to help me better understand the prioritization. So based upon the objectives are very focused on kind of enabling the use cases, right? So if we were to come into a situation where we need the platform team to support the use cases, would that take priority over the improvement of the developer support?
That's a great question, and I think it's a little bit complicated for the following reason. The platform team is probably going to have very little to do with the top priorities for Volta. When it comes to MCord, the platform team will be more involved here, but well, I guess the driving factor, what I was going to say was that we don't have any hard and fast deadlines short of MWC. So getting platform team help here would be probably the one thing that would draw against everything that we were talking about below. So how do I?
There is also another.
Go ahead.
There is also another side of this that, like, having the dynamic onboarding will be a huge help in chasing the hybrid pod high level priority.
Yeah, that's so. I don't. It's a fair question that if we were to produce an absolute ordering, we would need to decide between these two. And if you can see where I'm the dynamic service onboarding and completing the diagnostic logging, and the MCord items. I'm hoping it doesn't come down to that. I really think these two things need to be done. Everything else, because of that, the getting the MCord things included, I would probably not go deeper in terms of quote unquote must. Let's drop to the build system for a minute and see if this changes things. I know this isolating service config from profile config has been discussed for some time. Well, as
also
auto config the fabric. Go ahead.
I was just saying, I think that isolating the profiles also helps the MAE story, multi-axis edge.
Oops. So the fabric, Joe, I think I saw some activity there, and I know this has been discussed a number of times. Does this find its way to the top of the list now, finally?
It's about timing, right? I mean, is there enough time to get it done before February, given that there's the holidays in between? And
yeah, we
can try, but it wasn't high on our list, so it's up to you.
So,
yeah, I mean, we can help you, but it'll probably require some time from the XOS team as well, right?
I don't think a
Or
huge
the
amount of
build team,
time.
at least. Build team,
Yeah, it's
right?
more about the build.
Yeah.
Nothing's affected.
so Jono, did you make enough progress on this that you have a feel for how hard it's going to be?
Yeah, I mean, I'm getting more of a feel. I don't know. I think it's probably doable in the time frame, but I don't know. The devil's in details, and I kind of have to see what problems I would run into if I started doing it. But I have an idea of what stuff needs to be changed now.
It's one of those thorn in our sides that we just keep kicking this can down the road, and it would sure be nice if we could knock this one off. Okay, let's.
Yeah, I think it certainly make some progress there. Maybe it won't be entirely done, but we should at least start doing it and see, really get a good feel for how hard it's going to be.
All right, so I'm going to note, should start working on this to get a better feel for difficulty. All right. The last three nits, are they all musts?
I think the first one, the upgrade to Ubuntu, there's a couple, it can be split out. We have it as being the platform we host on, which would help, or we host the head node, or it runs on the bare metal on the head node, which I think is a must for Kubernetes. But then within the containers, they aren't necessarily musts. We're not necessarily even running Ubuntu within some of those containers. So I think the first one.
So on the head node is
on the head or Kubernetes host nodes. Yeah, that makes sense.
So there's an implication there, of course, that means we're upgrading mass, which means we're upgrading all the automation containers that use the mass API around that. And we still need to talk about how do we separate kind of the onboarding hardware mass upgrade from the software provisioning.
I'd like to discuss that because that has come up. That has come up in a variety of ways, and currently mass is really entwined in the way that we deploy a full pod, and I'm thinking it would be nice to get it less entwined.
Agreed.
Which is kind of the the move build system towards zero touch, the support installing a full pod on pre-provisioned nodes. It would be nice for Mass to install everything and then the build system take over and do its thing after Mass is done. Whether we go that route or not, we have to discuss.
As well as be able to deploy, assuming that something else has set up the hardware.
Right.
So how do we deal with this?
I think we're pretty close to full pod on pre-provisioned nodes. I think that's actually low-hanging fruit, and that would get us.
So the untangling Mass and build. I guess I can leave that here as the point you're after here.
Yeah.
So this supports pre-installed pods. Am I right?
Yeah.
I captured that right?
Or pre-installed.
Pre-install physical hardware.
OS, yeah. Some machine, yeah. I don't know the right way to say it other than machine. where the OS is already installed, it's just where something else has provisioned the OS. Yeah.
All right.
Can it be pre-provisioned machines?
Yeah.
All right. So again, what are we going to get done for 5.0?
I think the on head node is a must, and I think Gopi would agree with that probably.
Yeah, again, I agree. It's just there's implications there.
Right.
But okay, so if the untangling addresses that and keeps us from having to upgrade Mass, that's the intent here.
Or make that there's less interdependency so that it's easier to upgrade.
All right. So what I think this
if we intend to go to 1604, and we intend to keep supporting Mass, we're upgrading Mass. There's no way around that.
That is the implication.
I understand that this is a requirement for Kubernetes. I just want to point out that I think there is going to be quite a lot of work to separate the service configuration from profile configuration in the build system. So just keep an eye on the timing.
Right. I think a lot of these things, when we get down to making the actual epics and other stuff in Jira, we're going to have to really work through our order, because I think we have a lot of A depends on B, depends on C.
Well, the dependencies are, the knot is tightest right here.
Yeah, I agree.
And it would be nice to unknot this.
As long as we're still dependent on OpenStack in any way, does that prevent any problems going to Ubuntu 16.04?
There's another document out there that has some of the Kubernetes progress things. And the first thing was getting XOS and the other Cord containers running on Kubernetes on 16.04. And then after that, it was things like getting OpenStack running on Kubernetes on 16.04. So we do have a pretty deep dependency path to get another working OpenStack installation on 16.04 in a way that we want to support it in the future. So this is a pretty, and whether that's doable in the 5.0 cycle depends a lot on how well and how much work all of those items are. I don't know what the scope is of them and how much help we're going to get from outside organizations that Gopi has talked to on getting those going, because they sounded, a lot of them, like the 99 Clouds and the Linker networks of the world, sounded like they could help us with this to a great extent, but I'm not sure on their timeframes either.
And some of that work is happening kind of outside Cord proper, right? They're like, oh, give me my own repo so I can experiment.
Yeah, and that's. I wish we had Gopi around to ask. He might be able to clarify this better than I'm able to.
All right. So, is there an untangling that will let us run Kubernetes in the way we want to? What is the minimal work we can possibly do? Pushing off till later. Is there a weak spot in the Gordian knot around all of this that we can cut through?
No, I think the problem is there's some technical debt here we've just been incurring by not going to 1604 earlier, and we've been using it as kind of the, hey, we don't want to go to 1604 because we know that means upgrade mass, and we really want to entangle that. Let's kick that can, and we're at the point where the can can't be kicked.
All right. Pay back technical debt.
You know what they say about payback.
Okay. The Tosca engine, is this an easy one to knock off?
Yeah, that's an easy one. I'm working on it. It should be done by this week, hopefully.
Okay, you get that in before we even get to the next sprint. Excellent. That's an excellent strategy. All right, moving to QA. You've already done a pretty good job of calling out the high and the mediums. Is that continue to be accurate, Suchitra?
Yeah, I changed it.
All right, let me do the bookkeeping here. High, medium, high. Got it? Okay, do we have anyone on from eCord?
Yes, I'm here, Larry.
Great. So
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay.
So what we've been doing is trying to decide what of the listed material is required or must.
For 5.0?
Yeah.
So from our point of view, the automation of the slow path, the CFM automation, which is already in progress, and as a stretch goal, possibly one of the services, one of new service, like a new service.
Okay, so I've got.
To be defined what?
So automate and optimize the VEG and vRouter as service chain options, automate the monitoring and EVC creation. And what was the third one?
Yeah.
Stretch.
A new service.
But the
it's
new
written
service,
in the doc we shared yesterday.
The new service is a stretch.
I would say that I would not like 100% commit to it. It depends on how easy it is, the first two bullets.
Got it. Okay. Well, I think that's captured then. Everything that's here is certainly a good thing to do if you get time for it.
About using pseudo wires.
That's another good question. I thought about it. I didn't talk to Mark. We can put it in. The problem that I see is that we don't have the hardware to test with a four switch fabric. It would require us to plug in at least 3 other switches in one of the pods, and as I understand, that's a pretty big requirement in terms of hardware in the lab itself. I can discuss this with Mark and come back. I would actually like to have it in 5.0.
Okay.
Actually, Larry, why not add it as a goal for 5.0 as a stretch goal? It also depends on. Okay, thanks. It also depends on the time and energy we can put in, because there are some other projects that might require some of my time and maybe Mark's. So that's that.
All right, good. I think this captures it pretty well then. So we've made it through everything. I want to return to this notion of swarming, which we did effectively in the previous couple of sprints up to 4.1. It looks like the highest priority on swarming between a domain team and a platform team is in the MCord case. I'm asserting that, so correct me if you see it otherwise. So that's the highest priority for platform MCord swarming. I guess arguably, we didn't bold any of this, but this would be another opportunity if it comes to it. I'll just refer to it as another opportunity. Oops, comment.
Something that I would add is not a very, I would like some of one guy from the Cord team, which could be John or Scott maybe, for helping me properly smooth through that automation that I was talking about before.
Okay. All right, so I guess so it really is the case that there's a opportunity for swarming here too. So the way I'm recording this is, again, it's another opportunity. And now it's suddenly, I'm just becoming redundant. So let me just get rid of this. Every one of the EMR hybrid A cords is an opportunity for swarming with between the platform team and the domain team. The highest priority amongst those, I believe, is MCord. And I think that leaves for the platform team sufficient give to invest the time necessary to take care of the platform-specific things like dynamic service onboarding, Kubernetes, refactoring the profiles, upgrading Ubuntu, and so on. Does everyone believe they have enough guidance to do sprint planning based upon this? In that case, someone was going to say something?
Yeah, I think it will be great if we can start this week before the sprint planning next Monday to sketch out epics and stories. I think we have a lot of good candidates for epics in here, so that we can open and close them in a reasonable amount of time.
Do you guys want to start doing that tomorrow, Thursday? Maybe we'll take this offline and we'll set up some times.
So I think at this point, it now reduces to team activities as opposed to cord-wide, A. B, I will reassert Andy's objection to planning while we still got a release. We really need to get 4.1 out, and it can be a distraction to do too much of that. I'm sympathetic to Matteo's point that we can start to make progress there, but we have to balance that.
Yeah, I said that because I understood we were going to cut the RC1 this afternoon. So in theory, we should have some breaks between the RC1 and the testing and eventual bug fixing.
Yep, good. That's fine. That's all good. So, because it's the broadest set of things, I think if we took it from the platform team, dynamic service onboarding, completing diagnostics, refactoring to isolate profiles, the Ubuntu upgrade and all of that entanglement, migrating to the new Tosca engine, those are called out as and a plan for the Kubernetes work. Those would be the items to prioritize and sequence. And then, as necessary, I would just kind of set aside some time for the swarming without necessarily knowing the details of what fills into it. 25% of your time or something on that order, just to allow for that coming down the road.
But as part of the planning, could we identify who's supporting what? Or are we saying all of the platform team?
Well, I think it's likely to be the case that the people with the most experience there already would be most likely drawn there. So as an example, Scott to eCord, Andy and Sophan to mCord. I would easily imagine it continues that way.
I would agree.
And I mean, that's not a requirement. So the one, I mean, it didn't get called out as a high priority. The one that worries me a little bit is this, is trying to coordinate with, on the awesome work. I think that's probably still largely in a kind of a design state more than anything else for right now. Probably comes to the top of the queue when we get to the next release. Let me just make note of that. This is remains largely a design effort. Until 5.0 or through 5.0.
And Larry, I have a question. I might have missed this, and I'm sorry if I did. Is there anything around ONAP that's going on into 5.0?
Not explicitly. So Awesome has an ONAP dependency, and when you get down to Acord, and now I know where you're coming from. Acord has an ONAP dependency. What did not get in here, and thanks for reminding me then, is the proposal that we do an eCord ONAP. I don't think it's going to be, I'm going to record it as an item, but probably not a bold, high priority item.
So if my take is that the eCord team, with the things that we said before, is already at maximum capacity.
So this will depend on.
So we have. Sorry, go ahead.
I'm making the note that the ONAP integration depends on community involvement.
For now, yes, we can prioritize it and put it at the top of the list for the next release, but definitely not for this one, because with the automation work that we want to get done, it's not happening. We don't have the resources, and also by looking at it, both me, Mark, and Gopi, it's still somewhat unclear what pieces should be tackled and how we should integrate in a proper way.
Yeah, so that actually brings me back, thank you, that's a good, we got it recorded now. It brings me back to the multi-access edge. And this is back to the point David raised, which is why are we doing that now? This actually is also related to the ONAP integration, because it's MAE where the ONAP people are looking for reconciliation with Cord as to how these things come together. So ONAP integration, I'm just going to call it the question because we don't know what the answers are. And so that those conversations just continue to go, round and round, and having in the context of MAE. That's the deliverable, if you will, for which ONAP integration becomes important. Anything else? All right, that was very productive, and thanks everyone for being so diligent on calling out what the highest priorities are. That really simplified matters that we can prioritize here. And with that, let's call it a day. Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Bye.
Guys.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye bye.
Bye, guys.